Hello, I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. Welcome to another episode of SAE Tomorrow Today, a show about emerging technology and trends in mobility with leaders and innovators who make it all happen. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to be joined by Adam Campbell, Senior Manager, Safety Innovation and Impact, Gatik. On today's episode, Adam discussed scaling autonomous middle-mile operations safely and efficiently in the United States and Canada. We hope you enjoy this episode. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be with you, Grayson. Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Thank you so much for your help for the SAE ITC working group around technician safety. You're the one individual every time on camera, so I got to give you a lot of credit for showing up, being engaged, and going on camera. So thank you for that. And then as it relates to Gatik, I love the tagline, owns the middle mile. It's truly amazing. I speak to one of your investors, Riley Brennan, and I speak to other investors, and I can't figure out why nobody's competing with you. And I see that you file for a trademark for owns the middle mile. Really, really impressive there. Adam, how is Gatik approaching the development and commercialization of the autonomous middle mile?
We were incredibly focused on, not just developing autonomy for autonomy's sake. There was a historical period of time where, with infinite time and money, AV companies were going in and trying to solve autonomy, broadly speaking, thinking that, time was infinite and so was cash. And, from our founding in 2017, Gatik has been excruciatingly focused on solving autonomy problems that are able to be solved with the capability of technology today, while also solving for pain points of customers. And it turns out that the middle mile segment of the supply chain is that perfect place where both technology and commercial application come together. So what that means, just to unpack the middle mile a little bit, the middle mile as we define it exists between, distribution centers and micro-fulfillment centers and in the lanes between them and stores. So we're moving freight, whether it's groceries or consumer packaged goods, chicken for various customers, but in that B2B short haul space. And that's where, there's a ton of pressure applied to that segment of the supply chain, in the not too distant past during the COVID era. But now today, there's been gasoline poured on that fire, and this element of the supply chain is critical to the success of e-commerce strategy with a lot of key and massive players in the space. And Gatik is there supporting the expansion of that operation with a lot of Fortune 500 companies within the United States and Canada today.
How much was this driven from the consumer's just-in-time attitude? If you order an item on an e-commerce platform, I got to wait 2 hours. That's not good. I want to hear now. Is that starting to accelerate those pain points in the middle mile because the consumer demand is now, not when we were kids. Oh, you wait 3 weeks and it'll be here and you get used to it.
Absolutely. I mean, on behalf of Gatik, I want to thank everybody for being impatient customers. This drives all kinds of demand and need and concern through the lens of our customers, right? They want to meet the demands of their customer base. Those customers want speed of delivery, to your point, Grayson. They want all of the convenience and choice of every SKU available or imaginable that you can view on your phone at any moment. And they want it for nothing. They want to pay nothing for it. And so, while the customers know exactly what they want, our customers, the shippers, the grocers, the retailers, they are challenged to meet that demand. And it's only through innovation and some disruption that can be done. And, Gatik is there serving the middle mile need there. And that is allowing those customers to provide that service to their customers in the near term. We're incredibly excited to work with some of the most forward-thinking retailers in America today. And we're looking to do that more in the future. But it's an incredibly exciting time, a lot of pressure being placed on retailers today. And today is where we're able to start executing with them.
Do you see the trend of micro-fulfillment centers or small-sized distribution centers continuing to explode? You're seeing some real interesting experiments in New York City, seeing some interesting experiments in the retail area. Walmart just opened up their commerce platform for logistics. So do you see that trend of micro-fulfillment accelerating?
Absolutely. I mean, the demand of our uptake is sort of in some respects in lockstep with the sort of revolution, if you will, of supply chain and moving towards micro-fulfillment centers and away from the regional distribution centers that sort of reside many hundreds of miles away from urban centers. The idea for MFCs, the micro-fulfillment centers, is to position them closer to the urban centers where customers are generating the greatest demand. And when you put a bunch of goods, a bunch of SKUs in closer proximity to customers, you're allowed to service the demand in a much more nimble and expeditious way. That's been the sort of structural change that has happened within the supply chain over the last number of years. But by doing that, you change the cost structure, you change the expense from the retailer side, what it costs for them in a traditional sense to operate their network. There's many more facilities requiring more drivers to move more goods and more trucks more often, right? Cost goes up as you start increasing the number of players within the space. And again, that's where Gatik comes in. We're able to provide the value and the service to our customers while managing and reducing costs over time for them. So they're able to have both ends of the same. They have their cake and eat it too, I guess is my point there.
There you go. We just don't want to be Marie Antoinette though. So Does Gatik become the broadband pipe for the future of logistics then?
I mean, we would love for that to be the case. But, this is the movement towards smaller platform trucks like those that we operate. We use class 3 to class 7 straight trucks for our model of operation. So shorter routes, more nimble routes, faster and more reliable delivery is, I think what any retailer on paper would love to have as part of their everyday operation. And, for us, as you said at the outset of this, Grace, there aren't any other players automating this segment of the supply chain today. So right now, we own the space. We trademark the term as a result. We own the middle mile, and we believe, and with the amount of adoption that we're seeing into our business, we believe we're tip of spear in showing that this is the future of logistics and transportation, and we only expect this to continue in the future.
Are those routes repeatable routes where, say, you're going at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., 10 p.m., where you're going back and forth all day? Are they repeatable?
Yeah, incredibly repeatable. And that's the whole sort of intent and core value of our operation. It's, the sort of tagline is B2B short haul logistics on known and repeatable routes. But to unpack that, when we scope new routes with customers, we're really looking for those that are ready for automating today. And the most ready and the most sort of the lowest of the hanging fruit is looking at those that are of the relatively shorter of the distances, but are highly utilized and able to be used multiple times in a day. So in the pure hub and spoke model, it would be picking up goods from a distribution center or an MFC out to store and back in sort of that star pattern. That's, one classic operation. The other is sort of the multi-stop where you're picking up for multiple drops from one, again, distribution center, going out to a number of stores, coming back to restock and heading out again. But from our side, as long as we know the starting point and the end points, we do all of the background diligence work necessary for mapping, validating any combination between starting and end points. So while it's known and repeatable, it doesn't mean that it's a straight shot from A to B and only between A and B. That's sort of one core application. There's a lot of customer use cases where that is the go-to-market strategy with them. But there can also be circumstances where we're going A, B, C, D, back to A, and then going D, E, F, back to A, and so forth. So we can iterate between facilities, but we need to know where those facilities are in advance so we can do all the necessary mapping and statistical validation before we deploy.
Getting back to internet plumbing analogies, now you're the AWS Elastic Compute. You can add compute where needed, take away compute where needed. This gets very, very interesting. It gets very, very scalable for your customers. What is the safety case for this approach?
So when we look at safety across we look at safety across the whole entire of our organization, from development, testing, deployment, implementation with our customers, full life cycle, as well as at the organizational level. There's, I wish I could give you, the number that we chase down, but that is not how safety cases work in the space of autonomy. We ingest data from across the organization, and of course, critically is looking at how we verify and validate what we call Gatik Carrier. That is the automated driving system that we deploy on behalf of our customers. And so that process is one where we begin the process scoping with our customers first to identify what routes are most ready for autonomy. As we talked about, we're not just going to automate any of our customers' operations. We want to make sure that what we do select for automation are those that can be met in a relatively short term today and can provide us the safest path to deployment with our customers. So once the sort of routes are selected and we've risk mitigated right up front, we don't have to select any, the shortest route even between A and B. We can do the necessary work, and we do risk manage on the route level to make sure we're not going through areas of high congestion or known high congestion or construction zones, school zones, hospitals, fire facilities, these sorts of things. We ingest the metrics around what the risk of incident is on these networks and contemplate whether one route or another is most appropriate for deployment. Even though we know where the starting and end points are, we select how to get there based on marrying the technology to the route requirements on the product side. In the validation process, in the statistical validation process, we whitelist route by route with our customers. We don't develop general autonomy and place that on every customer route that we have. We validate every single route as we go. That's been our playbook ever since our founding in 2017. And when we launched driver out operations with Walmart in 2019, or 2021 rather, we spent 24 months in the process of validating our technology on one single route, 1 7-mile route in Bentonville, Arkansas, running about 20 hours a day nonstop. So the extent of data coming in, the extent of metrics and the amount of confidence that we had in those metrics for the failure rate and the success rate of our technology was incredibly high. Again, this is the value of operating on known and repeatable routes, is that the data that you generate in order to validate safety for your technology is incredibly robust. There's a very distinct connection between sort of test validation data and what you can expect in the future, because you reduce the extent of those unknowns in the real world because you've directly observed many of them over the course of validation. That's not to say that every unknown is accounted for. There's still that gap that needs to be closed over time, and we risk mitigate around those. But we are incredibly thorough, incredibly diligent in our deployment strategy, and we are knocking down the time it takes to sort of execute fully driver out operations. We began at 24 months, as I said, in our first route in Bentonville, Arkansas. It took about 12 to 18 months to do that again in Ontario, Canada, with our customer Loblaw there, and that happened a year later. And so we don't need to race to the finish line when it comes to deploying our technology. There's a very clear business case and safety case for what we're doing. And we're proud to say that, so far in all of our full driver out runs, we have a 100% safety record, no incidents following our approach to deployment. But I think, again, this is a testament to how diligent and how methodical and patient we can be with this type of use case.
You're proving, one, the technology is scalable, and two, you're proving you're a really great community partner. How is it going over on the local level where you're avoiding firehouses, you're avoiding schools and other buildings? Is that helping to build trust in the communities where you're operating at, where you're going in there and saying, hey, this is the route's going to be? Is that helping to build trust on that local level for you?
Absolutely. And it is central to our strategy with deployment. And it gives us, we have a lot of sort of time and resources allotted to those, what we call pre-deployment activities, whether it's in an existing jurisdiction, but in a sort of a different capacity, or in an entirely new jurisdiction, a new state in which, or country for that matter, if we are going to be deploying in the future. Tip of spear is engaging local leadership, both in government and other community outreach groups, to sort of advise as to what this is, educate and hear their concerns and help to alleviate them to the extent that we can, and to bring them along in the journey with us. We don't like to surprise anybody with a deployment. I think to date, I don't think anyone would say that they were shocked to see a Gatik truck cruising along the roadway in their area. From government all up to the national level as well. Everybody knows what Gatik is doing. They know where we're going to be, where we're planning to be, and we ensure that all necessary stakeholders are involved in the process. But it's our responsibility to ensure that happens well in advance of deployment, that the necessary education and bringing up to, whether you're talking about others who might have their hands on the vehicle, like law enforcement, for example, first responders. They are key stakeholders in this process. We're proud to work shoulder to shoulder with many of them as we develop our technology and we scale our operations. But it's an incredibly, incredibly important part of our deployment strategy.
No surprises is a wonderful philosophy to have when you're deploying new technology in a community. What do your interactions with law enforcement look like, both pre-departure or pre-launch and post-launch when you're operating operations?
So the pre-launch activities, this has been ongoing for many years now. And, really it starts at grassroots, especially if we're in a brand new jurisdiction where folks may not have heard of Gatik or understand, how or what makes Gatik different perhaps from other AV use cases they might be more familiar with. So sometimes there is an element there of sort of closing the gap or some bias they may have about, some other use case they've heard about. Oh, I get, robo-taxis, for example, Gatik, is not that. Freight movers are not that. And we have to ensure that we are very clear about what we are and where we're going to be, and also being very clear about what we aren't and where we're not going to be. And so from an education standpoint, from a training standpoint, how to engage with our technology is incredibly important. Is, again, all in the pre-deployment activities and ongoing. We are deeply involved in the processes of working with law enforcement agencies and federal and state agencies around developing procedures and best practices for how to engage with an autonomous truck, whether Gatik specific or any other freight mover. It's a tightly regulated space, as I'm sure you know. So it's important that, that the law enforcement officials specifically are keenly aware of us, what makes us unique, where we're going to be, how to engage with our technology safely. And that's it's an incredibly important part of what we do. And there's daily, weekly, monthly engagement with those folks to ensure that that's the case, both from Gatik's perspective and from an industry perspective. I'm proud to say there's a lot of coalescing around this topic at the industry level for the freight movers. And there's been a lot of strong collaboration on this topic with the CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. And, it's a pretty great group of folks who understand the collective value of what we're doing as an industry and want to move the needle forward to allow for their staff on the enforcement side to feel comfortable, but also to be practically safe around any engagements with autonomous vehicles in the wild.
Gatik in the industry as a whole has done a phenomenal job, especially on the freight side, of building trust with first responders and law enforcement. And I saw your colleague Rich Steiner was recently in Austin Capitol, meeting with public officials, law enforcement, showing them what the Gatik truck can do, because once we have the trust, we can establish a business, then we could scale a business as an industry. Adam, what does the process look like to go drive a route? What is that? Is that obviously you have the trust mechanism with law enforcement and the local community, but what does that look like from a Gatik perspective?
So internally, like I said, it starts with making sure that the routes that we select with our customers to deploy on are the ones that are most appropriate for autonomy. Not every route is. So there's a very rigorous approach to understanding what we can and should be doing in the near term and what not. And that sort of scopes the product side. Like what skills, what functions does the vehicle need to have in order to properly deploy and complete the mission, which is start at one point, end at another point, and deliver freight on time and in full. So that's step one. Once that is selected, then we go on a data gathering mission. And we have our mapping vehicles upfitted with a lot of tech to ensure that we start collecting data on day one as we deploy with our customers. But at the same time, we're moving freight with those same customers. And so right from day one, we're providing a value in moving freight for our customers, while we're also beginning the data collection process that is feeding into our validation engine so that we can monitor what is not only happening on the road to better unpack the ODD, the operating design domain, and begin that simulation process at the back of the house to ensure that the vehicle is properly skilled and performant to function and deploy the necessary skills reliably on our roadways with our customers. So there's a lot of, as that data is coming in, we're validating a lot, we're achieving, or we aim to achieve a lot of statistical benchmarks. We looking at it from a risk perspective, the intent around bringing in and ingesting all of this data is to pose and to have a statistical case for posing no unreasonable risk on public roads. For us, that means being highly performant and more performant than a highly skilled, trained, attentive human operator on the road. We're able to generate data and to prove out those metrics in a lot of different ways. But again, bringing in the middle mile concept here is that when you know where you're going to be at any given point, how many times you're going to be passing through a left or a traffic light controlled intersection, for example, you can really focus in both your simulation testing that you're doing and any limited public road testing that you're doing onto the scenarios within the infrastructure that you are going to be bypassing multiple times per day. So you can simulate and validate at the scenario level in a much more direct way in a a known and repeated route type of deployment strategy than you can in other use cases, like robo-taxis, for example, who can't guess how often they have to guess, I should say, how long or how often they're going to be utilizing certain types of infrastructure. They have to make inferences about that. We make very direct claims about how often and how frequently we're going to be interacting with certain types of infrastructure. So that gives us a better way of translating simulation data into the metrics that will translate into public road operation data that we expect to generate. And that validation pipeline has been executed end to end a number of times. Like I said, in our deployments in Arkansas with Walmart and our deployments in Ontario, Canada with Loblaw. And it's an ongoing process. It's not just about getting the vehicles to drive her out with these customers and then, set it and forget it sort of concept. That is not the way in which we operate. There is a continuous flywheel of data coming in, continuous validation and maintenance of the safety case to ensure that what was true yesterday is true today from a safety and reliability standpoint. And all of that data is monitored through our safety case dashboards. And that is something we take very much to heart. And we continue to do that with every net new route that we deploy on.
It's becoming very evident that safety is core to the Gatik culture. You have a measured, well-managed approach to drive route. Not all companies do. Where does that culture stem from? Does it stem from the founding? Because it's really impactful and it's really important to highlight.
Absolutely. From the beginning, certainly my employment with the company, but well beyond and to the day one of our company's founding, safety is core. Safety is essential. We know that we have nothing without it. These are all sort of seemingly cliche things to say from a company building an automated driver, but it is no more true than it is today. There's a graveyard of companies, unfortunately, in our industry that, just haven't been able to achieve a level of safety before deploying their technology. And, those are things that we and others in the industry, have very much followed and been aware of and understanding of what is at stake in what we're doing. We know we're putting a vehicle on the road. It's new. It's a new technology, and we take that responsibility incredibly seriously. And so that forms the entirety and way in which we structure our deployments, who we engage with in terms of customer and the types of routes we operate on, and those that we just don't. We say no a lot, and it's because we want to make sure that what we do is done responsibly and safely. That has proven very successful for us to date, and there's no need for us to depart from that. We can be incredibly patient. We don't have to rush to deploying hundreds and thousands of vehicles to meet some fictional demand. We can go step by step, very methodically with our customers, and we see no end in sight to that flywheel of consumer and customer adoption and our ability to scale safely our technology in those deployments.
In the old children's story, the tortoise versus the hare, the tortoise won. Hare might have been faster, but the tortoise won at the end of the day because the hare got cocky. Gatik, you're taking the tortoise approach. You're going methodical. You're doing it right. What distance do the Gatik trucks operate? Does it get to a certain point where you say, okay, that mileage is too far? Or is it really just on a use case scenario where it makes sense for your clients?
I'll say up front, there's no technological limit to the distance that we run. Really, the limit that we hit is one based on business value. So on paper, we can go up to about 300, maybe 400 miles round trip. That would be sort of in that multi-stop sort of application or distribution center to distribution center application. But typically, like the most common route is somewhere between 60, 80 miles round trip. That allows for multiple runs per day, which means that, customers are going to get a high level of utilization out of our assets if we're running 18, 20 hours a day, which is our fairly common application. And so you put those two things together, there's a lot of freight that can be moved when the starting and end points are relatively close together with a vehicle that is operational up to 20 hours a day. And so that's where, from a business case standpoint, there's incredible financial value to our customers. And that's what we lock in on when we're, again, selecting those routes. There's a lot of things that go into it, one of which is how much freight can we move in what amount of time? And the shorter the distance, the more freight is moved. And again, the business value goes up in the eyes of our customers. So that's the sort of standard approach. And again, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit within that middle mile that we're addressing from a commercial standpoint today.
Amazon orders don't sleep 18 to 20 hours a day. Your trucks aren't sleeping either. They're moving. The more people buy, the more your trucks are moving. One of your Gatik's largest markets is Texas, a huge inland port there in Hill. I think it's the largest inland port in the country, actually. Why focus on Texas?
Yeah, great question. And not, we have seen the value in operating in Texas for some time now. But we began our operation in 2021, I believe, landing in Alliance, Texas, where I am currently, and started moving freight a year later out of our facility here. Texas is the center of freight movement of the United States. All of the major players in freight movement are here. The majority of our flagship customers operate and have their headquarters here as well. So there's good commercial reason to be within the state. Of course, the regulatory framework here is favorable for freight movement within the state. And for us, because we are moving goods commercially, we need sort of two criteria to be satisfied from a regulatory standpoint. One of which is that we're able to test driver out technology on public roads, and then we can also charge a fee for service of moving freight without a driver on board. Those two things are satisfied in the state of Texas and a number of others as well. But combining that with the commercial adoption and, relatively favorable weather, minus a hailstorm or two per year, there's a lot that comes together here. And, I can say as well as a transplant from our Ontario, Canada offices, the Southern hospitality is alive and well in Texas. All government agencies, first responder agencies are incredibly welcoming of the freight movers in the state. And so it really does feel like a family here when it comes to what we are doing at Gatik with our local and state level leaders. So yeah, incredibly excited for what has happened and for what we know to be coming down the pipeline here in the next year or two.
Hey, you have to give the Texas state officials, elected officials, a lot of credit. They've welcomed the autonomous freight industry with open arms, and they've been there every step of the way to help and been very welcoming. Same thing goes for Mr. Perot and Ian over at Hillwood, what they've done to welcome the community to Hillwood Alliance. Does Gatik have plans to expand in the Texas market? It's a big state. I read a statistic. It could take you 13 hours in the widest part of the state to drive across. So there's a lot of land to expand. Is there any potential expansion going to happen in Texas?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a central reason why our focus is Texas right now. Just to give you some numbers, today we have about 60 vehicles that are operational today across our entire operation. And by the end of next year, we're looking at having an estimated number of about 300, with the majority of them being deployed in the state of Texas. And so we are invested in the state, and it's because of what we've seen in terms of success here already, where we know the demand is coming from, the customer base that's here, all of the stakeholders that we talked about are incredibly excited about this as well. So yeah, we've doubled down and tripled down on our investments in the state, and we see no end to that. So we're incredibly excited about our deployments upcoming here in the next year or two.
So it's Gatik scales in Texas and other locations. In your opinion, how is the product going to change? Will the truck form factor change? Any changes coming to the product?
From a product standpoint, for now, we're automating B2B short haul, middle mile operations with our straight trucks. There is no need for us to change our platform right now. We certainly can customize, and we do today, the platform to the need of the customer, whether it's different box lengths, whether it's refrigerated or not, liftgate or not. Like, you really get technical and nuanced there, but we can do all of that today. But the form factor is in very high demand. If you're looking at sales of straight trucks in comparison to tractor trailer combinations, they're outpacing them right now. At least the rate of sales are increasing very much so in the straight truck world. And so the supply chain is starting to understand the value that straight trucks brings to an operation. We happen to be the only ones automating it right now. So we're getting the benefit of both, the acceleration of both, on the uptake of autonomy and the uptake of straight trucks into supply chains today. And, and that comes with some disruption of the classic tractor trailer operational models. If we can move more goods more frequently than a tractor trailer can in the middle mile network, it makes a lot of sense to bring us into the fold and change up what has traditionally been operated by a class A tractor trailer operation. But all to say, yeah, we are sort of moving away from the sort of prototyping style of development and really into the production scale level of development, both from a hardware like platform standpoint, but also from an operational standpoint. We are, by size, one of the largest movers of goods in the region, and definitely in the eyes of any autonomous freight movers, and we're the largest in the continent in terms of scale and amount of freight moved. So quietly, we're sort of leading the pack in that respect. And I expect more of that sort of production level readiness. The things that sort of happen as you start thinking about hundreds and thousands of trucks being deployed, being where the change happens. The form factor, the technology, all of that is, being considered with scale in mind today.
The Richmond Federal Reserve Bank recently came out and reports that 40% of CFOs are now putting automation into their operations. That's the first time it ever surpassed 40%. Is that acting as a tailwind where you're getting CFOs in these large Fortune 500 companies are saying automation when they reach out to Sam or the team? Is that acting as a tailwind as you look to scale up operations as well?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which we get, our introductions, the inbound introduction that comes, or, whether it's from a CFO or, VP of transportation saying, hey, I have incredibly lofty metrics that they need to hit internally from a, service standpoint, from a costing standpoint. How can you guys help us out with this sort of thing? And a lot of times the conversation does start there, where, it's been an interesting shift where I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, the conversations were typically happening from the in-house sort of skunk works strategy innovation teams out of retailers, a few people in a dark room kind of thinking about new interesting things to bring into the fold. And automation was relatively in its relative infancy then, but that's when you might get the call or get a call back. It would be from a team like that. Now we're sort of moving into the sort of more traditional folks who are looking at sort of general transportation needs, general supply chain needs. So chief transportation officers, chief supply chain officers, chief financial officers, as you say, these are the folks who are now starting to call us or in getting involved in our conversation much sooner. And I think that's just a signal to your point around the maturity of the industry. It's moving in the right direction with the right people in the room who need to make these sorts of decisions, and they are big ones. This is new and different, perhaps more so than what they're used to. But we welcome that. It's very much in alignment with who we'd hope to be speaking with on these topics. And yeah, we are seeing that transition for ourselves as well.
As the market changed and moved more toward automation, your scaling is perfectly timed to the market. How Gaham and the team got the timing right, don't know, but well done on that, because it's all starting to align there. Adam, this has been a fascinating conversation. I can't wait to see as Gatik scales up. When I visit the DFW area, I start counting Gatik trucks. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll be a fun counting cars game. It'll be a counting Gatik trucks game. As we look to wrap up this insightful conversation for today, what would you like our listeners to take away with them?
What I'd like them to take away is that, safety is absolutely everything at Gatik. It's incredibly central to our operation here. But we also want those to recognize that you cannot scale safety without having a scalable and viable business model to back it up. You will not save a life in meaningful scale and keep roads safer unless you can marry safety and technology together with a repeatable and valuable business case with customers. And at Gatik, we are able to deliver on both, have been and will be in the future. So we look forward to continuing to deliver on that promise in the future.
Gatik is a business that values and prioritizes safety as they build a model that's highly scalable. Today is tomorrow, tomorrow is today, the future is Gatik. Adam, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today.
Thank you, Grace. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to SAE Tomorrow Today. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, please kindly rate, review, and let us know what topics you'd like for us to explore next. Be sure to join us next week as we enter the world of motorsports, from being a driver to the engineering under the hood.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.